Welcome to another episode of From Startup to Wunderbrand with Nicholas Kuhner. We've got somebody in a totally different time zone from us today. I think you're in Thailand at the moment, Pedro, but we've got Pedro Uria-Recio. And another interesting fact, Pedro was born in Bilbao, which is one of those cool art places as well. So Pedro is a specialist in AI and has had a couple of very senior roles in tech and mobile companies around the world. He was also a management consultant at McKinsey, focusing on the telecommunications and finance services. So very important, obviously, in driving forward AI in business. He's also been an entrepreneur in residence. He's been in venture capitals in studio, has spoken at TEDx. He's been recognized as a global 100 global innovator, and has an MBA from the University of Chicago Booth. So, Pedro, great to have you with us this morning.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to be here with you and to talk a little bit about, well, my experience and about my book, Machines of Tomorrow.
So I see you've got a great photo there behind you, and that's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. And the topic of the book is Machines of Tomorrow, from AI Origins to Superintelligence and Post-Humanity. I mean, these are big themes. How did you get started on this book? I mean, this is a cutting edge theme. Maybe talk me through the start of this book.
I'll tell you what the book is, and then I'll tell you how it started. Right? So this is a book that has two parts. One part answers pressing questions about the future of AI. How is AI going to impact jobs, education, our government system, how it is going to impact the competition between the US and China, how it is going to impact war, how it is going to impact spirituality, right? On top of that, how it is going to impact our species itself, our own biology, if we apply AI to biology, right? This is the first part. And the second part is understanding AI, understanding the inner workings of AI, how it works, but not only from a technical perspective, which I do cover, but most importantly, from numerous angles, from the angle of history, from the angle of economics, from the angle of politics, how AI developed decade after decade, what happened in the .com, what happened during the oil crisis in 1973, and how we got to generate AI. So there are these two parts. One part is looking at the future, and the other part is explaining the history of AI, but from many, many different disciplines, not only from a technical point of view. So this is the book. So how did all this started, right? That was your original question. So I was preparing a podcast a few months ago about the history of AI. And I started writing some notes about the history of AI. I really love history. It's one of my passions. I also love AI and math. I love all these disciplines that later became part of the book. So I started writing a few notes, and then those notes, little by little, became 450 pages. And that's how the book started.
Well, I've been involved in a couple of book writing exercises, and one of the most important things is getting an editor to pull your ideas together. But the worst thing about that is seeing all the red lines under all your words and paragraphs. So I'm sure that it's a bit of a stressful process. So this book is out now. We'll put a link for where folks can have a look at it. But let's have a look at some of the chapters that you cover, because we're looking at how AI is going to shape our world. And I think if we hear about Neuralink and new technology like that coming out now, humanity is going to interlace with AI. So in the topic here, it says AI is our new mind, robotics our new body, we're becoming new species at the intersection of carbon and silicon. Talk to me about some of the exciting things we could sort of perhaps expect in this space.
So one of the key themes of this book is this concept of interlace, about how we are integrating artificial intelligence in our own being, in our own body, right? One of the ways is Neuralink, which is brain-computer interfaces. So Neuralink is a technology that allows our brains to connect to a computer, and you can move, for example, a robotic arm with a computer just with the power of your thoughts. You can communicate telepathically. There are a number of applications, right? That is part of cyborg technology. So brain-computer interfaces is one of the many technologies that make cyborg technologies. There are many other things, right? So what we are observing is that it is possible to modify our body through these cyber technologies on the one hand, and it's also possible to modify our own biology with artificial intelligence. And I tell you how it works. So genetic engineering is something that has been developed since the late 90s, right? So you could modify DNA. Originally, scientists modified the DNA by using their own thoughts about how DNA should be modified in order to create drugs. But what is now possible is to modify the DNA with artificial intelligence, and it's just generative AI. In the same way that you are asking AI to create a text or to create an image, you can use AI to create a gene or to create a chromosome, to create proteins, to create drugs, etc. So what is probably going to happen in the future, if this continues, is that our own human body will be able to be modified using artificial intelligence. You will be able to make modifications in your body so that you live longer, you are more immune to cancer, you can see in the dark, you eat and you don't get fat. Now, what that takes us to is a potential future in which our own biology is no longer the traditional biology that we had, is no longer the result of millions of years of it. It's also the result of our own modifications that we are making into our own body. Not everybody is going to be modified in the same way. Some people will be modified, other people will choose not to be modified, other people will not have the money to be modified. And that takes us to the conclusion that possibly there are going to be multiple castes, multiple types of human beings that are going to be physiologically different living in the future, right? And this is one of the most controversial parts of the book. But yeah, the book is called Machines of Tomorrow because the machines of tomorrow is us. We are going to be a mixture of technology and biology. Now, today, we are already a mixture of technology and biology because we have phones, right? So the fact that the phones are outside the body and not inside is just an anecdote. What is going to happen in the future is that these functionalities the phone has are going to be inside us.
It's interesting you mentioned that idea of tasks. I mean, we're seeing that already, not with AI, having adaptation to our own bodies yet, but in society where there are countries and societies who have access to great internet, lots of technology like here in Norway. And we go into Africa where there's poor internet, low access to technology, sort of items such as iPads and things like that. And those kids are growing up in a different caste, basically. So definitely ethical considerations that folks need to think about when it comes to all of these AI discussions we're having. I suppose it's not just castes, but it's also going to be different countries are going to have different levels of adoption of AI. I suppose if we look at China versus the US, any thoughts on that?
Well, in the book, I cover a number of possible utopian and dystopian scenarios, right? And this is what we are talking about. So if I start with caste, yes, technology has the potential, and this is in the dystopian part. Obviously, there are a lot of utopian and positive consequences of AI, but in this question, we're going to focus on the negative ones, right? So there is a digital divide between the people that have access to digital technologies and people that don't have access to digital technologies. One of the things that we are saying in this book is that divide with AI has the potential of becoming not only about having access or not having access, but also that our bodies are going to be different, that this is a divide that is not people that believe that they are superior because of certain demographics. No, this is people who live longer. This is people who are more immune to cancer, and this is people who are not, right? So this is a divide that is real. And that can be, depending on how you handle it, it can be profoundly dystopian, right? I have another chapter where I cover all the utopian parts of AI. Obviously, there is going to be a huge and immense creation of wealth. There are going to be advantages for the environment as well, because as technologies become more mature, they're going to be cleaner. And there are also the dystopian. Also, I cover China, right? So China, a lot of people in the West, we know about generative AI and about all the artificial intelligence industry from the US angle. But a lot of things are happening in China, right? People know the social credit system of China, have heard about it, don't really know how it works. People think that China is a place where there is no regulation at all about AI or not data protection at all. The reality is that there is a lot of data protection and a lot of regulation. And one of the reasons is that the government, in the same way that they regulated the internet, creating the Great Wall of China, the government is also regulating AI in order to prevent chats, or in order to prevent large language models to potentially say things that could be against the interests of the government of China. One of the things that is very, very interesting coming to China is in year 2017, the Chinese government announced a plan, a strategic plan about becoming a world leader in artificial intelligence. The United States around that time, they didn't feel very comfortable hearing this, right? And then what happened afterward is what is called the Cold War of AI. And the Cold War of AI is a technological competition between the US and China in order to become two superpowers in artificial intelligence. We also have the Middle East, countries such as Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates are investing a lot of money. Possibly they're going to become a third pole in this multipolar world where we have multiple AI superpowers, right? But yes, China is playing very hard in artificial intelligence. And one thing that is very, very interesting is this, and a lot of people don't know about it. The US, as of now, is very, very focused on consumer applications of artificial intelligence, consumer applications of LLMs. China is very focused on corporate applications of LLMs. And one of the reasons is precisely regulation. As I was saying before, launching a new consumer-oriented LLM in China is extremely complicated because the government wants to make really sure that that LLM upholds the core values of socialism. And that is literally from the Chinese regulation. It has to uphold the core values of socialism. There are a lot of, there is like testing samples that they have to provide. There are a lot of tests that they have to pass. And it's complicated. So it's going to take such a long time to launch a consumer-oriented LLM that it's never going to happen. So then Chinese people who are very entrepreneurial, very hardworking, they say, well, we are going to focus on corporate applications that are not regulated. So that's why China at this moment is very much leading on that space, while the US is focused on consumer-oriented applications.
That's so interesting. I mean, theoretically, AI should be taking us beyond politics, beyond religion, beyond these aspects, but everything is hemmed in by obviously society, our politics, and the political structures. And you touched on the US, and we've seen Gemini removing their image generation or their generative image offering because it came up with completely incorrect types of images.
Yeah, from a historical point of view, they were inaccurate. Yeah,
and if we look at these ChatGPTs and Groks and Geminis and so on, do you think there's a potential for these to be weaponized in terms of politics as well? Is that I only use Gemini, I only use Grok because I'm open, I want free speech, etc., or I just want to be, have to follow the line, which would be Gemini. Do you think something like that might come along in terms of these models?
Yes, I think so. So in the dystopian part of AI, which is only one chapter, we are talking a lot about dystopia, but there are a lot of good things. There are a lot of good things to say. But in the dystopian part of AI, one of the things that we are talking about is the potential for the potential negative effect that artificial intelligence could have on democracies, and the potential negative effect that artificial intelligence could have in the concept of truth. And let me explain. I'm going to start with truth, right? Well, everybody knows that Facebook, social media has been used to informations that are not necessarily true, right? Everybody knows that. We have seen that. Also, in February this year, the World Economic identified misinformation and disinformation as one of the biggest challenges in the short term for the world. Even bigger challenge than climate change, which they have identified as mid. So the World Economic Forum is saying, hey, misinformation is a risk AI can create, not only through hallucination, but on purpose. AI can be used to create deep fakes and to create information that is not real. So we have to regulate that. And in this book, we follow an approach which is particularly at the end of the book, in the epilogue, I talk about what are the tenets of the World Economic Forum regarding how AI should be managed. I criticize those tenets. Sometimes I agree with many things, but when there are aspects that I don't agree with, I criticize them. And the fact that truth has to be regulated is something that I wouldn't agree with. I think people have to become more critical rather than creating an authority that says this is true and this is not true, right? Which is what the World Economic Forum is kind of implying. Think about this. If you show film, any film, to somebody who was living 200, 300, 400 years ago, person is going to believe the film is real. But you know it's a film, you know it's fiction. Why? Because through your education process, you know what films are. Right? So we have to change our mindset about how truth is handled. The other super important aspect regarding truth, and this is a little bit more technical, because the book gets into technical details as well, is the concept of synthetic data. And synthetic data, I don't know if you are aware of that, but synthetic data is data that is not real, but it looks like real. It's realistic. Algorithms require data to be trained, but sometimes you might not have the data. So you have to use this fake data that is realistic enough to train those algorithms. I give you an example. Self-driving cars. Google is one of the first companies, actually the first company that started training self-driving car algorithms. And in order to do that, they film roles with cars moving, people crossing, animals crossing. And with those videos, they created the algorithms for self-driving cars. But now there are other more traditional car manufacturers that are getting into this at this moment, but they don't have so many videos. Google has been creating these videos for almost 20 years, right? So they have a huge library of videos. If you are a more traditional manufacturer and you're just starting, how are you going to do that? You don't have the data. What you do is you take an AI that is going to create those videos for you. And they are not real videos. They are created by AI, but they are realistic. They are realistic enough. Now, the problem with training artificial intelligence with data that is not real is fake, is realistic but fake, is that the output of that algorithm is going to be super difficult to differentiate whether that output is real or not real. It makes it extremely complicated. Reality is mixed with fake information. It's going to be very difficult for people to differentiate that. Can that be exploited for political purposes? Absolutely. It can be exploited for political purposes. And I believe that is what is going to happen. One of the things that in the book that I say at the end is AI authoritarianism looms, which basically means AI can be used for political purposes. It can be used to supervise people. It can be used for all these purposes. And it will depend on us how we manage artificial intelligence, whether this happens or doesn't happen. But the potential, yes, the potential is absolutely there. It can be used. And the Chinese social credit system, which does not really work, is very dysfunctional. The Chinese social credit system is more dysfunctional than dystopian. But things like that could become functional in the future. Yes, it could happen. It's one of the possible negative consequences of artificial intelligence in our world. And there are others that are positive, but it's one of the negative ones.
Well, one of my favorite movies is Minority Report, and I actually met one of the AI mind that was used to consult on the film. And again, I think anything we as humans can think of will happen. And obviously, looking at data, you can figure out who is probably more likely to get an illness or steal something or murder. So these things aren't out of the bounds of reality. So I think, if we just look from a positive side, there are a lot of positives there. You're talking about synthetic data, and for businesses, I think this is a great opportunity for value generation in the future. and that is creating this, or creating or curating data. Because, as you said, a lot of companies don't have data or enough quality data. So there might be some legacy companies who might not have a product, say, for example, Nokia or Kodak or something, who have masses and masses of data that AI can be trained on, and that can be a value source. So I think we're going to see quite a lot of old businesses with lots of relevant data become useful, and that this knowledge economy or data economy is going to open up a whole bunch of new industries. And as you said, the curation of that, is there a stamp saying this is not fake data? It is going to be an industry by itself, fact checkers of data.
You're absolutely right. And China is leading that area, right? Because it's corporate applications. One of the things that I have done in my experience I have been chief data officer in multiple companies. And one of the things that you always try to do is data sharing, particularly if you are in a conglomerate, right? And I have been in conglomerates. So if in a conglomerate, you want to put in place an application of data, and you have some of the data in one subsidiary, other part of the data in another subsidiary, other part of the data in another subsidiary. And then you say, well, can we share this data so that we create this application? Imagine the application is advertising. Is possibly the most clear case. Other applications could be credit scoring. And so calculating the score of how likely somebody is to pay back a loan based on data that is distributed across multiple profiles of that individual in multiple companies, right? In Europe, credit scoring is not so much used because there are banks, but in emerging markets, credit scoring is a big thing. So data sharing has always been complicated, not only because of regulations. It is possible to do it in a way that fulfills the data regulation of your country, GDPR in the European Union, but it's always complicated to exchange the data, do it at scale, making sure that people feel comfortable, or even the leaders of those companies feel comfortable using the data. And obviously, because this is regulated, if you do it wrong, well, there might be repercussions, reputational repercussions, or other kinds of repercussions for your business. That's always been very complicated. And China, because it's focusing on corporate applications, is leading on these self-driving cars. They share this data of self-driving cars across multiple manufacturers. Once they have cleaned the data, they also share industrial production information that could be used, for example, to forecast GDP. So in China, there are data exchanges. Some of them are actually state-owned. Some of them are state-owned, and they are doing this. We don't see that in the US so much, and that's why I'm saying China is actually leading quite a lot in this enterprise or corporate aspects of AI.
Yeah, I like that data exchange idea. And as you said, probably in a socialist country where the government forces you to share data out of your silos, it's going to be very different to sort of capitalist societies. But to your point, the quality of that data might be suspect in terms of it might be sort of state-driven in terms of where the state ideology is versus where what the real reality is. So
and you see that in China, as I said, absolutely. So the regulation says those applications have to uphold the core values of socialism. So when you look at the European AI Act, there are some situations in which you have to follow a process that is not so different from the one in China. And those situations is when the data is used for employment applications or education applications, according to the European regulation. So basically, AI is a technology, like any technology, is subject to whatever the politics of the place where you are at. In some cases, you might agree with that. In other cases, you might disagree. But AI is profoundly human and is going to impregnate political systems, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. And these are some of the things that we talk about in the book. Yes.
With regards to the book, who is the right audience for this book? Because it's almost storytelling in terms of what's going to be happening in the future, but also what's available now. Who is this for? Who should be reading?
So this is for anybody who wants to understand artificial intelligence, going from a student, business person, university professor, a voter who wants to understand, hey, how is AI going to be part of the country? This is for anybody who wants to understand artificial intelligence, not only from a technical perspective, but from a much broader perspective. I explain AI from the beginning when it was developed, when it started to be developed in 1956 in the Dartmouth workshop. Is the moment it was a summer workshop when the first ideas about AI started being developed. And I explain everything that has happened until 2024. And then I go from 2024 to the future, explaining cyborgs, explaining robotics, explaining very interesting cases about how robotics is being used in Japan, explaining the science behind using AI for DNA modification, explaining how quantum computing could be used for AI, explaining how superintelligence could be developed. So in this book, I try to be science-based, but at the same time, I try to explain the history. I try to explain the implications that we have from different angles. I try to be very multidisciplinary. So anybody who wants to understand AI from a very holistic point of view, this book will be for that kind of people.
As somebody trying to think about a new business to take advantage of all of this new AI that's coming out there, this book will obviously give you the foundations and the background that you need. I recently listened to an interview by Peter Thiel where he spoke about mathematics being less important potentially going forward for judging careers and what you should be studying. And he was saying that interpersonal and language skills are going to be probably more important than mathematical skills going forward. Because if we look at calculators, we look at our laptops, we look at Excel, we look at AI, etc. Those mathematical calculations can be done much faster, much more accurately with AI. What are some skills do you think that we should be looking at beyond the current paradigm that we've got, where if you want to be a doctor, an engineer, scientist, etc., you have to do maths, you have to know calculus. What sort of direction would you send your kids in?
There are 3 skills that I mentioned in the book. The first one is critical thinking. Critical thinking is not math, but critical thinking is having the ability to analyze from something. Why I say that it's going to be important and why I don't think it's a good idea that people rely completely on technology for these kind of activities. Because number one reason is today in your first job, my first job was being a programmer, right? Now with AI, your first job is not going to be a programmer. Your first job is going to be a manager. The programmer is going to be AI. So you have to manage an AI, an agent doing the software. If you are a lawyer, that's very junior analyst lawyer. It's not going to be you. You are going to be the manager. That's going to be your first job. Before, your first job was to be the analyst. Now, not anymore. You're going to be the manager and you have to manage this analyst, which is going to be an AI. And same with many, many jobs. In order to be able to manage them, you have to understand how that job is, because you cannot blindly follow what AI is telling you to do. One of the risks that we are going to have with artificial intelligence, not only hallucinations and synthetic data, because I talk quite a lot about the erosion of truth. One of the risks is, what if AI one day learns to lie? Right. So I think the first point is analytical skills. I think they are important, precisely in a world where artificial intelligence can be used by a minority of people, I would say a monopoly, because artificial intelligence is monopolistic, or at least oligopolistic, right? It requires network scale effects, and that means that a few companies are going to own most of it. is monopolistic. The nature of it is monopolistic. And we see now in the US, it's just a handful of companies handling it. And in China, it's the same. So number one, critical thinking, yes, I think it's important. Number two is adaptability. How many times have you changed jobs? I don't know. I have changed jobs, maybe 4, 5, 6 times every few years. But in the future, we're going to have to change jobs much more often. And one of the reasons is that as artificial intelligence is becoming more powerful, a lot of activities are going to be automated. And if you are doing that activity, you'll have to move to whatever the next thing is, right? So maybe you started being the programmer or the data scientist. Now, data scientists, a lot of that can be done with large language models or with data robot or other solutions, right? So you will have to move up the previous skill into another job much faster, because a lot of older jobs are going to be automated. A lot of people will be able to do that, but a lot of people will not, because they cannot move fast enough. And that's going to be a challenge. So becoming flexible, being able to learn fast, changing jobs fast is going to be very important. And the last one that I mentioned in the book is entrepreneurship. In the long-term future, AI possibly is going to impact jobs. I don't think that's going to be the case in the short term. I think in the short term, as I explained in the book, AI will create more jobs than it will destroy, but at some point it might not be always true. So being independent enough in the sense that you can create your own job, you have the initiatives to create your own company, to find your own opportunities, to be free in a way, free from others. That idea of entrepreneurship, I think, is very, very important, right? And obviously, entrepreneurship requires interpersonal skills. It requires a character, and also requires getting on with people, collaborating with people, right? And with machines. So those are the 3 skills that I selected. Analytical skills, adaptability, and entrepreneurship. I agree totally with interpersonal skills. We could make it 4.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things that comes to mind when you talk about this and the change of jobs is we might be able to reverse the Industrial Revolution almost, where the Industrial Revolution gave us everything that looked the same cars, same tiles, same clothing, etc. And what AI might allow us to do is go back to sort of handcrafts, go back to spending more time creating, unique dishes and spending more time having a coffee. And one interesting thing I thought about is with AI, we are thinking that we're going to get more productive, more effective. Isn't the point to be less, less productive and less effective most in terms of not having to work a full week, not having to work 5 days a week, 8 hours or 9 hours, being able to complete our work in a matter of days or hours, and then have the rest of the month or rest of the week free to go and pursue other sort of human things. I think there are some huge opportunities that AI are going to give us, and it's almost going to be like a religious change in terms of us having to think in a completely different way how we run our lives, how we engage with other people.
I think there are positive aspects in that, but there is also a risk. So yes, you have to keep a balance in your own life. I mean, it's not all working, but this is nothing new. I mean, this 2,000 years ago is the same. No? People will have to keep a balance between working and living, right? At least those who could at the time. So yeah, you have to keep a balance. You have to be happy with your life, right? Now, artificial intelligence can freeze some time from you. The problem is that if artificial intelligence takes all jobs or a large majority of jobs, what are those people going to do, right? Elon Musk talked about that in that famous interview with Rishi Sunak, in which Elon Musk said that, basically you will need to find a meaning in life if artificial intelligence if work is something optional, artificial intelligence can do all that. I think that is very risky. And I'll tell you why. Putting in place, I talk about that in the book, putting in place these systems, these universal basic income systems for people that cannot work is risky, is subject to a lot of manipulation, is subject to a lot of wrong incentives. I explained that in detail in the book. I explained the case of Argentina, for example, why in Argentina, every time that something like that has been tried. The other thing that I find it very risky about AI when it comes to freeing people from work and from education is this. Education. Until now, education has been, the purpose of education is making people ready to be productive from an economic point. That was the purpose of education, right? Making people ready to be productive. And what happens if artificial intelligence is in charge of all the production and people are no longer needed to be productive? Well, what could happen is that then what will education be? Education could become a mechanism for conformity into whatever the social order of the future is. We are just pure conformity of people and submission to that future order, right? Which is dystopian. So I think keeping the balance between the utopian aspects of artificial intelligence and dystopian aspects is very, very important, right? I believe that when a lot of people, including Elon Musk, talk about the future of work, I feel they're not carefully thinking about the consequences for everybody. And this is one of the reasons why you should read the book, because you should think about those things.
Yeah. Well, I think you've given us a lot to think about, and we haven't even touched on space and the potential of AI in space. But I guess we can touch on that when your next book comes up. When your next book comes out.
There are many things. Yes, I'm just gonna very briefly. We didn't talk about space. I do talk about space. I do talk about religion. How is this gonna impact religion? I do talk about how to control artificial intelligence. There are different ways of managing AI, particularly if that AI in the future becomes more intelligent than us. We didn't talk about robotics. We didn't talk about self-driving cars. I explained how self-driving cars work, how all that was developed in the early 2000s. We didn't talk about robots in Japan. We didn't talk about sex robots, which are already commercial. And there is this film of Steven Spielberg, AI, where I remember I was a teenager and there were sex robots in the film. Well, they exist today.
Yeah.
But there are so many things, and so we will need a long time. But I'm very happy to have been here with you and talk about some of the important aspects of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, well, I still want people to have something to read in the book, so we can't go through all the elements.
Exactly, yes.
I'm sure we could chat all day. The last thing I'm going to ask you about is going to be on obviously the theme of digital marketing. And you've come from a telco background, and I think when it comes to data mining and actual data, the telco companies have the most information on consumers, other than Google, probably even more than the government and so on. If you had to look for in the future of digital marketing, where there are companies who have these masses of data and we can apply AI to them, what type of new marketing roles do you see coming up in the future? So what would you do if I'm talking to a marketing student? What should they focus on to be successful in the next couple of years?
Emerging in marketing, and this is something that I have devoted a lot of work, is using corporate data for marketing purposes, right? And telco data, as you said, is very rich. And one is very complicated to do that. Here in Thailand, I was running a company called True Analytics that was precisely doing that. We had access to data of 30 million customers, and we used that in compliance with the Personal Data Protection Act to drive marketing campaigns on different channels. In general, this corporate data, there are cases in which corporate data has been used for advertising very successfully, particularly in retail. So in the US, you have Walmart. All the data of Walmart can be used to target advertising. There is a company for doing that is called Walmart Dominate. Advertising on the website, advertising on the store, all different kinds of advertising is very advanced. In the US, you also have Kroger, another retailer. All the data of Kroger, how many products are in the shelf, when they are taken off, all that is used for advertising as well. So retail data has been used for advertising in very psychedelic ways, and it's very mature. It's happening in the US, right? The second industry will be financial services. Financial services is highly regulated, but within a bank, something that can be done and is being done is, well, you can use transaction data of credit card of your own customer in order to do advertising on your own channels for that customer. Obviously, you have to comply with the data protection regulations. If you want to use external channels, there has to be a consent, et cetera, et cetera. All this can be done with consent, and all this can be done with in compliance with the different laws, right? And then the third one is telco. Telco, there are less success cases of using data for advertising in particular. I think number one for sure is retail, then banking, then telco. Yes, telco has a very rich kind of data, but something that is missing. So what data we have? Basically, you have the browsing history of customers, right? Which has to be anonymized, and it's handled properly in most telcos. All telcos, they comply with all these regulations. But you have that data, you have the browsing history. The browsing history from a marketing perspective is missing one important thing that financial information and retail information data has. Is missing that transactional nature. So one thing is to look for one website. Another thing is having bought a particular thing. So the information that you are buying a particular product is orders of magnitude more important than the information that you search for a particular product, because most of the people that search for that don't buy it, right? So from an advertising point of view, retail data and financial services data is more valuable and more useful than telco data. Right? And these are, well, some of the things that I have tried to do, well, precisely. Applications of data multiple times for customer experience, for competitor intelligence, for credit scoring, for advertising. This is what I have been doing in, well, possibly the last 5 years of my time.
So it's just made me think about, with Apple Pay and Google Wallet, how much better their data is going to get now, because they've got the advertising side, so sort of what websites are doing, and they're seeing the end result in terms of what people are actually buying. So there's a whole new set of data that these companies have, which
you are absolutely right.
Very interesting.
And then coming back to what we discussed before, synthetic data, which is going to be revolutionary. The problem is that a lot of companies don't have that real data about transactions. Very few companies have it. Google has it, and Facebook. But most companies don't have that. Additionally, if you have to move that data from one subsidiary to another subsidiary, etc., you might be subject to data regulations that are there to protect people. But data protection regulations might prevent using data to feed algorithms. And sometimes they prevent using data to feed algorithms for the right reasons, right? But what all this is bringing us to is the importance of synthetic data. I mean, that is an extra reason why synthetic data is being explored more and more, because there is a demand for that. And that demand comes from the company that don't have the real data, and they want to have synthetic data for the same applications.
So for any budding entrepreneurs out there, if you can start creating synthetic data offerings to the market, that's definitely going to be a growth area for the future.
There are a lot of startups. There are a lot of startups doing that. And obviously, this is an area that is very complex from an ethical point of view. It can be used for the right things. It can be used for the wrong things. One of the things I try to avoid in this book as much as possible is judging and saying this is right, this is wrong. Yes, I have a chapter that is about dystopia, and everything there is generally bad. But then I have 20, 30 other chapters in which I try not to judge because it's complex. And people that are going to come after us, maybe 100 years into the future, those people are not going to have the same values as we have. So it's very complicated to get into these kind of ethical dilemmas.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's a complicated issue, but an exciting issue. And for those of you who want to stay on top of what is happening in the AI era that we find ourselves in, come and read this book, which is Machines of Tomorrow, From AI Origins to Superintelligence and Post-Humanity. And I've got a link here, machinesoftomorrow.ai is where folks can go and get some more information. So I'll put that link in the bio, but go to Amazon, go to all good bookstores, and make sure that you reach out to Pedro if you want to know more about AI. Pedro, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you,
it's been
Nicholas.
fascinating, and we could do this every day for a month. I think I'd get to everything.
Yes. Thank you, Nicholas. It has been great. So, and thank you for everybody who's listening. Thank you.